New York State PTA Treasurer. Prior to this, she was New York State PTA's Outreach Coordinator and Western Region Director. She has been an active member for over 25 years, beginning at Maple West Elementary School PTA in Williamsville, where her 3 children attended. She has held and led positions at the unit and council levels before, accepting a role as the Western Region Director. Patty is also a longtime volunteer for the Girl Scouts for West New York. Welcome, Patty, and thank you again.
Thank you, Rob. It's always great to be here with you. And I just want to welcome everybody tonight. We are up to 90 participants, so obviously an important topic. And so a little bit of a confession. This is my first time doing this particular topic and webinar. So what I'd like to do, because we have such a large group, we can continue to put questions in the chat, but also what I'll be doing, and I wish I would have thought of this sooner, but anyway, what I'll be doing is as we go through the presentation, I'll just give out the slide number that I'm on, so that if you have questions that you just want to jot down, what I'd like to do is kind of get through all of the presentation to the end and then work through some of the questions. So what we'll do is if you come on with a question and you can just say, I have a question on slide number 6, we can quickly flip to slide 6 and then, answer the question so everybody can see if that's acceptable. I tend to have very light PowerPoints, but this particular topic, there's a lot of details. So some of the slides are a bit wordy, and so hopefully we can work through those. I have already put in the chat box a link to a document, and the document is a audit report worksheet. It's a sample worksheet, so it's already completed with some pretend numbers, but we're going to be kind of using that document a little bit later in the presentation. So if you have a chance to download it or print it before we get started, you can use that also to follow along. So again, we're over 100 now. So welcome all. I'm going to now start the presentation. So I'm going to do the share screen slowly. Okay, and then I'm going to go from the beginning. Okay, why is that not working? Okay, so welcome all. We are all going to hopefully at the end of this feel very much empowered to be audit awesome. I'm going to start slide 2, and I'll just really number and talk about the ones that are the key. I just have some sort of my own housekeeping slides here. But I start, as I do all of my presentations and training, with a look at our New York State PTA mission. PTA is a powerful voice for all children, a relevant resource for families and communities, and a strong advocate for the education and well-being of every child. And you might be saying to yourself right now, what does that have to do with our unit audit? Well, this very important mission that we are all on together, we can't work towards without a strong foundation. And our foundation is maintained by our procedures and our bylaws. And an important part of our bylaws is the fact that we are required to do an audit. And what the audit will do is confirm to not only to your members, but more importantly to potential members, that you have good fiscal practices, that you're strong watchdogs on your unit's funds, and good stewards of your PTA unit. Much of what we're going to cover tonight, the audit instructions, can also be found in our New York State PTA resource guide. This is a link here at the bottom to the section 5A, which is the section that deals with finance. And the particular pages 15 through 19, and those are the actual pages, not the download page, because the cover counts as a page or whatever. But anyway, pages 15 through 19 detail everything you need to know about doing an audit. So the purpose of the audit is really to provide a reasonable assurance that the organization financial statements are free of any misstatements, and they're prepared according to general accounting practices and principles. What we all aim for is to have a clean opinion so that we can assure, as I said, the membership that we are properly accounting for all the funds that are been entrusted to us, and that we are using them according to New York State PTA guidelines. A more important piece that has popped up over the last several years since we have begun contracting with AIM for our PTA insurance is not only in addition to the requirement in your bylaws that you conduct an audit, but it is also required as part of your AIM insurance in order to maintain your unit's bond coverage against embezzlement, robbery, and theft. So again, if you do come up in your unit with a misappropriation or loss of funds for whatever reason, one of the first things that they're going to ask you for is a copy of your audit. So it's most important that we have that in place. So starting with slide 4, this is how we're going to get started with our audit. Referring back to our bylaws, every unit bylaws will explain this particular language of creating an audit committee. 3 members or more, or a professional auditor should be appointed by the executive board. I just want to clarify that that is the executive board, which is a larger body than your elected officers who make up your executive committee. So please know that it is the executive board that should be appointing this committee or contracting with a professional auditor. The committee is responsible for examining the treasurer's accounts and creating a statement report that will be presented to the membership at the first meeting of the succeeding school year. So please keep that in mind when you have your audit committee, when you're asking them and charging them with their work to do, leave them enough time so that they can prepare accordingly. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we're recommending is to consider appointing your audit committee starting at the beginning of the year in July. This gives you the opportunity to have members that are interested in the financial dealings and the financial records of your association so they can be very familiar with them when audit time comes. But it also gives you the added benefit of people that you can rely on to help you do your monthly account reconciliations. So again, as you all know, this is also part of your contract with AIM for your bond coverage. You also will need to do monthly bank statement reconciliations. So again, those should be signed off on. And so these members potentially of the audit committee could be a great help. You only need 2 people to do that so they can interchange as the months go on, who's ever available. But again, it's a great opportunity to have a committee that can kind of be prepared ahead of time to do the work of the audit committee at the end. It's important to also note that nobody who has check signing authority should be participating on the audit committee, and obviously not the president or the treasurer, and that's detailed in your bylaws. And then one thing that you will have your committee, you should have in your procedures is how the chairman of the committee will be selected. And that is up to your particular unit to make those details, and those should be documented in your procedures. This is slide 5. The key to a good audit is preparation. So the treasurer, as doing their work throughout the year, should always be making sure that everything is in order so that when it comes time to turn over the following documentation to the audit committee, everything is in good order for them to do their work. So here are the important documents that are needed. The last audit report also can be called a financial review. And you'll see the difference of those if you're referring to those back in the resource guide. They're very similar reports. An audit report technically is done by a professional auditor, whereas a financial review is done by the committee, a volunteer committee. And just to jump back a little bit on the professional auditor, there is no reason why, as long as your membership approves the expenditure, if you felt that your unit needed to have a professional conduct your audit, if either your income is higher than general, or you have a lot of transactions throughout the year, or you've encountered some difficulties, you can certainly do that. It is a legitimate PTA expense. I know a lot of our units contract with CPAs to help them with their 990 tax return, and that same person might be able to help you do your audit. But I do want to stress that even for the largest of units, a volunteer audit is manageable and can be done as long as the preparations are done. So obviously the checkbook, and and cancel checks if possible. We know that a lot of banks aren't providing that, but we'll provide a image. And so again, a legitimate PTA expense, if your bank is asking you to pay for those images, it is important that the PTA maintains that paper trail. So we do encourage you to have images of your cancel checks. All bank statements and deposit receipts should be provided. And of course, the bank statements, if your reconcilers each month are signing off on the bank statement with their signature, actually on the bank statement, that's fine. If you're using a separate document, and some units are using a separate form, those forms should either be attached to the statement or be collected together and handed over to the audit committee. The treasurer's book, or ledger, as we call it, which documents all of your expenses and it probably includes your checkbook registry. I know that I'm talking a little bit more old school, that was actually a physical piece of either a notebook or some kind of binder. We recognize that a lot of units obviously are using electronic and computer programs to handle their budgeting and their financial records. So we'll have to work out a way, and as treasurer, you'll work out a way to be able to get copies of your work to your audit committee, either downloading it to a flash drive or just sharing, by way of email or that type of thing. So again, even though we're talking about, and it sounds like I'm talking a lot about with physical and maybe, like I said, a little bit old school, please make this type of preparation work for the type of records and type of bookkeeping that you're doing. The annual financial report, which is the end of the year report that the treasurer should be preparing, that usually is a comparison report that shows your expenses year to date versus last year and versus your approved budget. All statements and invoices and receipts for any bills that you've paid, any check requests that have come either from your members for reimbursement to them personally, or for checks to be paid out to requests that somebody that might have a vendor coming into an event or a speaker or that type of thing. All those check requests should be turned over. And then finally, copies of the executive board and general association minutes that include the approval of the adopted budget, approval of any amendments that happen to that budget. As we know, it's a living document and can change throughout the year. And then also the minutes should reflect who handled the reconciliation. One note about the minutes, on occasion, the executive committee may have to approve some kind of adjustment to the budget. It's rare, but if it does happen, it's important that the executive committee, because their minutes are confidential, the executive committee should bring that to the board at the next meeting of the board and ask for ratification of their decision. And that would be recorded in the minutes. And again, that would be then turned over to the auditors so that they can see the actions that were taken. This is slide 6, continuing on the preparation. So once the audit committee has received all of the previous slides records from the treasurer, it's important for them first to make an assessment of the situation, assessment of what has been turned over to them. Number 1 is to confirm the opening amount on the first bank statement of the fiscal year, that figure matches the checkbook registry or the ledger. Again, the audit is never going to work if we have 2 different starting points. So the number 1 thing is we need to confirm that those 2 starting points are the same. And then we ask the audit committee to conduct a sample review of all the transactions, all of that paperwork that they've been given, all of the documentations of expenses and deposits. And what we do is ask for about approximately 20%, a review of 20%. It's a random 20%. So just go through and, you know, like every 5 transactions you want to take a look at. If you have about 100 transactions, look at every 5. So you figure out about a 20% viewing. Are the monthly reconciliations correct? If there are unexplained items on the bank statements, had the unexplained items been answered by the treasurer? Are there invoices or check requests to match every disbursement? Are there receipts to back up a reimbursement check request? So again, a person who is asking for reimbursement for all of the supplies they bought for the family fun night, are the receipts attached for what that money was spent on, and are they totaled correctly? And then finally, bank deposits. We all know that when an event takes place or a fundraiser takes place, approximately when the money is coming in, is that money being deposited in a timely manner versus when the monies were received? And this is slide, oh shoot, now I lost track of my slides. I think this is slide 6. Okay, so continuing on the assessment of the records, making sure that the state and national portion of the membership dues have been accounted for separately from your general funds. And usually those are a below the line entry on the budget. So that's where you can find, in the year-to-date financial review, you can find the accounting of them there. Confirm that monies collected for a specific purpose have been dispersed. This doesn't happen with every unit, but if you do have a particular fundraiser or a particular event where you say all of the proceeds for this are going to help fund our speaker to come in on mental health, and make sure that those funds were actually spent on the mental health speaker if this comes up in your review. You should check with the treasurer to make sure that blank checks, unused checks, are kept in a secure location. And then finally, if possible, verify that all checks have 2 signatures and that there is a 2-signature approval for any electronic payments. We recognize that a lot of things can be happening electronically. So if payment is made that way, please, you know, there should still be 2 signatures to approve. Now, you are going to hear that a lot of banks don't pay attention to 2 signatures any longer. The insurance company is saying that, you know, 2 signatures is not something that they're requiring, but what we're saying is it's still good practice. It is a check and balance for PTA units to always have 2 signature approval, so that one person isn't kind of operating on their own as far as what's happening with the PTA funds. So again, the key to a good audit is preparation, and then this assessing of the records. So if you feel that these records are in good shape, that you are not finding errors, then it's time to move on. If you are finding that that there are some misstatements of funds, or that the numbers are not matching up, or there are errors in math, you can go ahead and expand your search of those and your review of those records. Go to another 10% or another 15%. If after that you're seeing that there's still errors, you might want to just stop what you're doing and go back to the treasurer and ask them to, you know, review what they've given. But if in expanding your search, you find that things are looking better, then you can move ahead with the audit. I do want to mention that the treasurer does not have an active role in the actual audit process. They really should just be doing everything that's necessary in the preparation to help it go smoothly. The treasurer should be able to inform you of any unusual situations, and they can do that maybe in a summary note. If you are a treasurer on the call, just provide your audit committee with maybe some summary notes to say, oh, we had this unusual situation happen in, you know, back in March. We issued a check to a vendor and it got lost, and then we had to rewrite it. And, whatever the situation is, if you can provide that information, it just helps the audit go a little more smoother. And then as a committee member to the audit, for the audit, you should be letting the treasurer know when your meeting date and time is so that they can, if possible, make themselves available during the time. And then you should get the contact information for the treasurer. I mean, back in the day when we did everything in person, sometimes we just have the treasurer in a similar location so that if we had a question, we could call them over. Obviously, that's, in the busy schedules that we have today, plus the pressure of COVID, that might not be possible. And certainly being able to FaceTime by phone call, or even, setting up some kind of Zoom thing with the treasurer in case you need to reach them, the opportunities exist there. Just a little bit about COVID too, when it comes time to do your meeting. I mean, you really need to do the audit at the comfort level of the entire committee. So if meeting in person is not going to work out, I know some of our regulations are being relaxed, but if it's not going to work, please work among yourselves to come up with this, once you review the process as we go through it, come up with a way that you can do that. There's, lots of creative ways that you've all been meeting already. So I'm sure that I don't need to come up with all the things that can be done, but it is not necessary for you all to be in person to do the audit. Again, you can do it via Zoom. You can do it via some other methods with everybody being in separate places. But if you do choose to meet in person, bring lots of hand sanitizers and masks and that type of thing. So, okay. So this is a link again to the sample audit report that we've been posting in the chat. Again, this is from the resource guide, and you will see and note on it, and I'm going to switch to the next page. This is what it looks like, obviously quite small. But I just wanted to give you just a little quick view of this. And I'm just going to move here to point out these numbers that are actually in blue. And this matches to what's in the resource guide. So each one of these numbers in blue, there are instructions in the resource guide, and we'll go over them tonight, that tell you this is how you get the number here, and you fill it in on line 4, line 5, or whatever. So it's a great tool. And then we will be developing blank worksheets and blank audit forms that will be downloadable for you. I apologize that we don't have them now. Many units have their own, but we are going to be putting together some samples of those, and and they'll be able to be found on the website. Okay, so now we're going to go over the steps, and it's funny, you can go through various other PTAs and state PTAs and different methods of doing the audit. There's all, like, you can do the audit in 10 steps, you can do it in 7, you can do it in 4. So it's sort of like that game. I can guess the audit in how many steps. So we're going to see how we go through our steps here. Step number 1 is set up your audit report sheet. And the report sheet is going to be very similar to the worksheet that I just posted. But so I always recommend making several copies to have worksheets, just to, put your initial numbers in, and then, clean it up for your final copy that's going to be presented to your membership. So everybody should have a copy of the worksheets, and a couple of them as you go along, as you conduct your work. Number 1 on the worksheet is the audit period. And the audit period will actually begin on the day after the end of the last date of the end date of the last audit. Typically, we like to do it for the fiscal year, so we're thinking July 1st. Now, what's important to remember here is if you did not do an audit last year, you need to establish a date. As a committee, you need to establish a date so that you can also make sure that that's the date you're working with as you go through all of the paperwork. Preferably, again, if you don't have a date and you have to establish one, that you do just start with our fiscal year of July 1st. Then for the end date, you have the option of one of the following. It could, mainly for the year audit, it either can be the ending date of the last bank statement you're reviewing. So again, if your bank statements end on, say, the 25th of the month, you can elect to do the audit June 25th as your ending date. You can go the full fiscal year, June 30th, which is, how, again, just making it a little neater, but it does sometimes overlap over different bank statements. If your bank statement is like a July 2nd, again, you can kind of work through it with either accepting the maybe one or two transactions that might have happened after June 30th that happened at the bank after June 30th, but were still on your books prior. You can work around that and make good notes for next year's audit, or you can, again, go back to the bank statement date as your ending date of your audit. If a treasurer has to leave office midstream, it is wise to do an audit. You don't have to do as deep an audit if your membership doesn't, or your executive board doesn't ask you to do that. You can do a smaller audit, just a review to make sure everything is in place so that the treasurer can leave in good faith, and the new treasurer can take over, also feeling that everything is in order for that person. It's important, again, that the beginning balance on hand starts where you ended. The beginning balance on hand is equal to the ending balance of the last audit. Again, there's a spot on the form that you would fill that in, and that will get you started. And then if you have an audit committee of 3 people, this is how we recommend you attack the audit. One person will have the checkbook and registry. One person will have all of the bank statements, and then one person will have all the documentation, all of the expense vouchers, the requests for reimbursements, and anything related to your deposits. If you have more people, I recommend splitting the expense vouchers and deposits so that everybody has a job to do. And also you can have another person just kind of sitting by with some form of calculator to keep everything moving. Okay, I'm doing a very bad job of telling you my slide numbers. Okay. So I will have to just wing the questions because I really didn't do a good job of keeping track. Okay, so it's time now in order to prepare for the report. So the first thing that the audit committee is going to do is reconcile the bank statements. So they're going to do a review of all of the expenses. And I think this is slide 12. So first, it's important to confirm that any outstanding checks listed on the previous audit, so again, they were recorded last period on the ledger, they were mailed out or given to a person, and they weren't cashed, so that they were listed as outstanding on the last audit. Just check them over and make sure that they have cleared the bank. If they haven't, you will put them down as a list as still outstanding, but certainly go back to the treasurer and let them know at this point those are stale dated checks and really can't be cashed or won't be accepted at any bank, so that you should have some procedure in place. Most units should have a procedure in place on how they deal with checks that are stale dated and not cashed. So now the person with the bank statements will start off going month by month chronologically from the oldest to the newest, and read off each check or, and again, check or electronic expense that came out of your bank account, making sure that each one of each item has cleared. A person with the expense voucher will verify the correct amount of that. So again, it will be, okay, we have our bank statement, we have check number 105 for $200. The person with the expense voucher will verify, yes, check 105 was requested for $200 to pay our Founders Day speaker. And so we will have that. We will, the expense voucher will be initialed that the check was correct. And then the person with the registry will also mark off that that check has cleared. So again, just a real checks and balances. It's a rhythm that you will get into, and it will move along very quickly if everything is in order. So that it may seem daunting to start out, but again, once this group, 3 people working together, get in a rhythm of getting things accounted for, it goes very smoothly. So again, make a list of checks recorded on the registry that have not cleared. So again, if you get to the statement and you find a check that's that you have on the registry that the person with the bank statements didn't read off, just double check that time frame about that check. And if you cannot find that it's cleared, let's add that to the list of uncleared checks so that you can account for that at the end. The person with the bank statements should also read off any non-check expenses as they go along. So again, you'll have sometimes expenses for bank fees or other types of expenses that, again, we talked about electronic, but if it didn't go against a disbursement, if there was a reason for anything to leave the bank account, you will verify that and look for the backup to it. The person with the checkbook should verify that even that amount is recorded. And really, these are the things that often trip up an audit if there's something that doesn't have a paper trail with it. So again, we want to make sure there's a paper trail to go with everything. And then the person with the expense vouchers or all of the expense related paperwork can verify that those were accounted for, and again, initial that so that we can feel comfortable that we have accounted for all of the expenses. One thing that we do always want to mention is that no checks under any circumstances really should be written out to cash. So that's something to be looking for as you're doing your audit to make sure that all checks and expenses were directed at a particular entity or person. Okay. We are on slide 13. On the flip side, now we also have to reconcile our deposits. So again, with the person with the checkbook, this time gets to take the lead, and the checkbook, along with the registry of all of the entries, they will read off to the deposits. The person who has the receipts verifies, yes, that's how much deposits we should have had. So again, when the fundraiser happens and the fundraiser chair and their committee accepts all the payments and they tally them up with a sheet and pass them over to the treasurer to deposit, or they deposit it themselves and they hand over the reconciliation that they made, everything should match so that there is a receipt for how much should have gone in the bank and the bank deposit matches that. And then of course the person with the bank statement also checks on that. So again, that's very important because we want to make sure when a deposit is prepared from fundraising or an event, that the amount that was collected and signed off for is actually the amount that makes it to the bank. Interest in most checking accounts don't have interest any longer. But if there is interest in your account, if you get any, that should also be included. Again, that's one of those little things back in the day that used to trip up audits, that they don't always be off by a couple of dollars because interest was missed. Any bank charges should also be recorded. Again, if there was insufficient funds charge for somebody who submitted a check to you or anything along that line. If you have a minimum charge for your account, all of those things should be accounted for. And if there have been voided checks, so if a check was written into the ledger as a withdrawal, as an expense, if it gets voided later, you should add that amount back as a positive. So again, if that check amount was deducted before it was voided, you need to verify that that amount is added back into the running total, your check registry. Another thing I want to mention about your account is it's important that only PTA money should be in your account. There are no pass-throughs here. So again, student council, the Sunshine Fund, the band club at school, we are not taking money and holding it for any other association besides our own. The only approved pass-through is the New York State and national portion of dues. That is money that can go into our account, but it is not technically our money. It is to be passed right on to New York State, and then New York State will pay national on our behalf for the dues. So it's really important that we remember that it is only our PTA association's money that is in our bank account. Now, one of the things that we're not covering in this audit, and most of our units do not have this any longer, but if your unit is one that has a savings account, you have two options. You can do an audit separately of the savings account and use the same form and present that separately. Again, you're going to be presenting an audit report of the checking account or the savings account. You also have the option, if you prefer, to adjust the report to include balance on hand in the savings account, balance on hand in the checking account, and compile it all in one. It's entirely up to what the comfort level of the committee is to do. Okay, so I'm just going to jump forward once. Okay. All right. So continuing on the reconciliation of the bank statements, this will help you start to populate the report. So we're on slide 14. So now that we've checked all of the bank statements and all of our expenses and receipt records, as well as our check registry / ledger to make sure everything's accounted for, we can now go ahead and start to record our totals onto the report. So we start with the last bank statement. Sorry. I scroll. Okay, so we record the last bank statement balance. So this is really just going to be, this section of the audit report is just an accounting of our checking account. Record the latest bank statement balance. So again, if we want to do June 30th, we figure that out from our bank statement. If we want to use our last bank statement date, June 25th or July 2nd, those examples that I gave earlier, we record the bank statement balance of that day. Now we add up all of any of the outstanding checks. Again, any check that has not cleared the bank as of that date, we will add those up. We will now subtract the total outstanding checks from the bank statement balance because they haven't cleared the bank, but we're considering them expensed already because we wrote the checks. And then we're going to record the result as now the balance in the checking account, as if those checks had actually cleared. This is actually the money that is in our possession, the balance in the checking account, only what we have not already committed to. Some things have cleared, some have not. The balance in the checking account now should match the balance on the checkbook registry. So this new amount that we have come up with should match our checkbook registry. If it does not, take a pause, calculate the difference, and review the bank statements to see if they're that exact amount, $6.05, $22.48, whatever it is. If you can find a match to that, maybe we missed something along the way, an entry was missed, the check we thought was outstanding was actually cleared. All of those things, just make a quick review to see if you can reconcile it so you can get your report to have the balance in the checking account match the checkbook registry. Sometimes on the checkbook registry, something's added twice. So all of those things can happen. So take a moment to try to make sure that you have those two numbers in agreement. If they're way off, then that will cause a much deeper dive into all of the paperwork that you already reviewed. And again, this might be the time to take a pause and bring the treasurer back in and stop the audit and kind of work through why these two numbers are not matching. Okay, I think I'm at slide 15. Receipts. Now we're going to do the top half of the audit report, the actual of what has been happening. So first we're going to add up all the receipts listed, all the income receipts listed in the checkbook registry and the ledger, including all the deposits that have been made, any interest, any amount that we added back from a voided check, and any other positive adjustments. Positive adjustments can sometimes be a bank error. The bank took in your checks and missed one, and later in their audit of their daily things, they found it and they added it back on. So that could be a positive adjustment. There is a lot of reasons for positive adjustments. When you do your bank statement review, as we were talking about earlier, you will find those positive adjustments and you will verify that those were accounted for in the checkbook or ledger. Now we're going to record the total of all of those receipts. We're going to add that total to the balance on hand that we started with, the beginning balance on hand that we started with. We talked about that earlier. It was the ending number from the last audit and the number which matched the number we started with. So we made sure already our balance on hand number 3 was correct. And we're going to total those all together, and that is our total amount of income for the year. Now we're going to add all the disbursements that were listed in the checkbook. All the checks written, any electronic payments that were made, any voided checks that were subtracted still should be included in the account, and then any negative adjustments in the account. Sometimes when we do a big deposit, and sometimes even, I counted, the chairperson counted it, the treasurer counted it, we still sometimes might come off for whatever reason, we were in a hurry, whatever, but the bank has caught it and they may make an adjustment for us at the bank. We're going to record the total of all those disbursements. We're going to subtract all of those disbursements, the total of those, from our total of money that we expected to have, our total income. And we're going to have that be our balance on hand. Our balance on hand of those numbers, of everything that we did for the year, should match the balance that we have in our checking account. Okay, so I think I'm on slide 16. One thing I want to say about this particular moment in time, it happens and it's great, if we do all the work and we take our time with our running totals and we come in balance. Our records and paperwork have been in great shape. One thing you can always do with your receipts and your disbursements is you can double check those total figures that you have against that year-to-date financial review form. So again, that form that we talked about that the treasurer prepares usually on a monthly basis, where they compare their actual year-to-date income with last year or against the budget. Those actual year-to-date figures should match here with your balance on when you calculate your balance on hand. The only thing that can trip that up a little is the state and national portion of dues. So make sure that you account for that accordingly. Okay, so this is slide 17. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. This last one was slide 17. So this is slide 17. So one thing too, again, if these numbers are not coming in balance, if they're way off, you might want to go back to the treasurer or the president to help to rectify it. You might want to return, like the books to them for them to look over and then bring back to you as an audit committee so that you can continue on with your report. Our role here as the audit committee is not to gotcha to the treasurer, like this is all wrong and it's all your fault kind of thing. We're not doing that. This is a team effort. And so the audit committee, if they aren't able to rectify, they should be reaching back to the treasurer for help. If you have a concern with the treasurer as the audit committee, then you bring in the president and kind of work through it. But really the bottom line here is we really want to get, this audit to be a clean audit. So again, if the numbers aren't matching and you can't figure it out, if it's too big of a disparity, or if it's not obvious why these two numbers are not working out after you've kind of double checked, again, it's time to reach back to the treasurer and with the help of the president to see how you can rectify that. If things are going well, we can complete the report. We can fill in the date of the audit meeting. We can use whatever method we have. Again, if we're still doing sort of like the pencil and paper kind of accounting, put a red line right under the balance in the checkbook where we have stopped doing our work, so that next year when the next audit committee can start, they know they have to start past your red line, okay? Again, you can make, if it's electronic records, you can work with the treasurer to put some kind of notation there to say that this is where we stopped, or this was where we finished 2020, 2021. You are going to be asked as the audit committee to make a statement on the condition of the books. So we've talked about that. We really want it to be a clean designation. And so on this report that I'm sharing with you, it does state that the committee has found the books to be in good order. You don't have to give that recommendation if you really feel strongly that the books were not in good order and you weren't able to rectify it with the treasurer. You can let your association know that the audit did find some constraints or some concerns, and you can document them there or on a separate report. Again, if you want to say that the bank reconciliations were not completed, or the records weren't in the right order, they weren't kept as they should be, either by date or alphabetically, however whatever the system is. But we would really prefer you to work with the treasurer and the president to get this statement to be that the books were in good order and that you felt comfortable and you were able to complete the audit and show that everything balanced. We will ask the committee members just to sign the report, and then the chairman will sign the last line. So again, as an audit committee, please don't sign something that you don't feel comfortable with. But I think if you give yourself enough time to do the audit before the report is due, if there are some concerns, you have time to work through them. You will make copies of the report, and the treasurer will receive the original to keep in the permanent records of the treasurer for the association. But you make a copy for, again, for the secretary who's taking the minutes. If the audit committee has a file that they pass on year to year, a copy can go in there. Some regions ask each unit to provide a copy of their audit either electronically or by paper to the region director. If that's something that happens in your region, please make sure you know that ahead of time in order to have a copy for that person. You will, the audit chair will be present at and on the agenda at the first meeting of the school year to deliver the report. And you will ask the general membership to adopt that report by a show of hands of approval. And that's it. This is slide 19. So I believe personally that, the work of the audit committee is important. I personally enjoy doing an audit. I like my audits to be balanced to the penny. I will also mention that, there is a certain amount of tolerance that you can have as an audit committee. If, the balance comes within, $5 or less, you can write that off as long as you work with the treasurer to make sure that all the books are corrected. But you have to come up with that as a committee, and that should be part of your units, procedures, what leeway the committee will have. But again, I do like to make sure that things balance to the penny, but I know that sometimes that can be cumbersome. So but anyway, a clean audit is a great thing. And we certainly celebrate that at New York State. We do have a professional auditor that does our audit, but we freely share the results of that audit with our members and with anybody who's interested in learning more about New York State PTA. So let's make this a celebration. Once it's adopted by the members, make sure everybody is aware of it. Put that out on your social media. The audit committee gave us a clean designation that our books are in great shape, because again, if your members and your community know that things are happening the way they're supposed to, that everyone knows where the money is, it's just one comfort level that will attract people to your association, to your unit, rather than turn them away, because sometimes when it gets messy around the money, a lot of people will be turned away from that. So I'm going to switch to questions, but I do want to just mention that this PowerPoint will be posted, and along with the worksheet, so you can kind of take your time to go through it or you can share this with your audit committee since you may not be appointed yet and don't even know if you're on it, or if you're the treasurer, you can let the audit committee know. But here's two other resources that I just wanted to point out. Your region director can be a great resource if you need, if you have questions about doing the audit, if you need more instructions, or if you need any other assistance, please reach out to them. This is a link to all of our region directors. So I'm sure most of you know who your region director is, but in case you are unsure, this contact link will take you to the place where you can email your region director. And then also the National PTA has a local leader kit that has a whole section on finance. And they do have a section on conducting an audit. They're one of the ones that had the audit in 10 steps, I believe. We had it in a few less. But the local leader kit has a lot of great resources, but you do have to register to receive that. And so I just wanted to let you know that it's not something that you can automatically go on to the national website and see. So, I'm gonna go back.
So Patty, we have the questions.
Okay.
Kyle compiled the questions. Do you want us to read them to you?
Yes. So what I'm going to do right now is, and you know how I am with technology, I'm going to stop the share, but I'm going to go back and share. Oh, shoot. Wait a minute. I did that wrong. Hold on. Sorry. I am going to share the slides by number now, so that if somebody wants to ask me something, I won't.
Patty, you only had one question on an actual slide number. So
Okay.
I think Rob's got a whole big Word document that might work for you.
Okay. What does that mean, Rob?
So I could just read the questions and
Yeah.
then you can answer them. They're pretty generic. Okay. So the first question is, are we able to capture all of these documentations electronically rather than on paper copies, also including income, expense, itemized receipts, and bank statements for review?
So that would entail, and if this is something that the unit does, like somebody is scanning all of those or is receiving them all electronically as the treasurer from the various chair people and people that are involved, yes, electronic is fine, but it's just a matter of getting the access to those to the audit committee. And again, I don't know, download them to a flash drive. Now I might be out of my comfort level on technology here. But again, as long, the important thing is that the audit committee has all of the tools they need to do the work they need. So however you can get it to them is acceptable.
Okay. The second question is, the unit says we use QuickBooks and every month they reconcile in QuickBooks and save PDF copies of them all. Can this be used as a monthly audit?
So the QuickBooks, yes, we'll do that, but we need other people's eyes on it. So as long as they are offering the QuickBooks screens, however they're doing it, either downloading it and sharing it, or just if you're showing the screen to somebody, as long as the eyes that are doing the reconciling have the bank statement and the QuickBooks to match, it's fine. But it's more important that they see the bank statement. The reconciliations have to be based on the bank statement. That's what they need to see.
Patty, on a similar note, on the same topic, can units use reports from QuickBooks for the totals of receipts and disbursements?
Yes, yeah, and that's a good way to prepare your audit committee. Again, I mean, sometimes audit committees will, set up their own little spreadsheet and just start plugging things in to do the math for them. But yes, if the QuickBooks is there, that is definitely something that's a great tool for the audit committee to have. They just, as long as The audit is all about checks and balances. It's all about having the paper trail in more than one place to compare.
Next one
Okay,
is
Rob?
we haven't received monthly statements from our school. I print a monthly transaction history off the bank website. Is that sufficient?
Yes, so what they're saying is the bank statement is mailed to the school. So yes, they can always request that the school forward the statements to, or send them home with a student, but yes, during COVID, I think we, as long as the transaction from the bank are being seen by somebody else besides the treasurer, so the non-signers, that they can review it and sign off that they reviewed it and found it to be correct, then yes, it can be done that way.
Okay. Next one is
So
the
Patty,
audit.
they can also call the bank to send statements to the treasurer, correct?
Sure, like you could go to the bank and change the address. Is that what you're asking? Yes, the bank can do that. And you could go into the bank and ask them for the
Yeah.
actual statement, like if you wanted that copy. But I highly recommend that if your bank statements are going to the school and you're still using this transaction statement that you print yourself, that you get those statements and attach them so that you actually have the statements, because I will say that if there is, and this is really, not something that, happens all the time, but if there is any discrepancy of funds, the review from the insurance company, they're very particular. So let's follow what they're asking for. If they're saying they need bank statements reconciled, let's make sure we're reconciling the bank statements as best we can. So again, get that bank statement and attach it to that transaction as quickly as you can for the year.
Next one quickly is the audit committee different than the executive committee?
Absolutely. The audit committee should be appointed by your executive board. I'm not saying that a member of the executive committee can't serve on the audit committee, but obviously the treasurer and the president cannot serve, and anybody else who's a signature on the account. So if your secretary is a signature on your bank account, part of the executive committee cannot serve on the audit committee. It has to be people that aren't already taking care of the money. This is an independent group.
Okay. This other one is also related to QuickBooks, but I didn't think QuickBooks was a requirement. It says, where can I get a copy of QuickBooks? Our PTA has to buy a copy.
Yes, and it is a legitimate PTA expense. I will say that we have a lot of units that you go through TechSoup to get the QuickBooks at a reduced cost through a nonprofit, because they're a nonprofit. So if you, that's a way to explore the QuickBooks. Again, it's not required. You can do a simple Excel spreadsheet. I mean, most units are not doing high-level transactions that need more than that. But again, it's a matter of comfort level. And if you have, a treasurer that feels comfortable and wants to use QuickBooks, and then, is able to train the next treasurer in case they aren't familiar with QuickBooks or Quicken or any of the other programs, it's a local PTA decision. So again, if you want to use QuickBooks and you don't have it already and you need to purchase it even at a reduced price through TechSoup, that should be approved by your membership.
A related QuickBooks question, they're asking if PTA recommends a particular version of QuickBooks.
I will have to defer and say I could probably get that information later. I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry.
The cheapest possible is my recommendation.
I'm with you on that. I mean,
you're not doing payroll and you're not doing all those services that are in the pro version of QuickBooks.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say the personal version should be sufficient for PTA types of transactions.
Yes, I will try to get more information on all of that. I mean, again,
Patty and Amani, I just checked TechSoup, and there's the basic version for non-for-profits is through TechSoup right now is only $50 for the year.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's all you really need is a basic version. Because you don't have payroll, you don't have payroll taxes, all of these additional things in the pro version.
Okay, next one is our PTA doesn't meet during summer breaks. What do we do?
Okay, our PTA doesn't meet. What do we do? Okay, so we need to have that audit committee in place before the end of the year. So before June 30th, have your audit committee. Your audit committee will more than likely have to meet over the summer. And I mean, again, if you let people know, we'd like you to be on the audit committee, we'd like to appoint you to the audit committee, and this is when you'll do your work, they have the option to say, yes, that's fine. I don't mind doing things over the summer, or no, I don't. So I'm not able to participate. But this is something that would have to probably more than likely take place over the summer, unless you wanted to wait till early September, because again, you know, you have to make the report at your first meeting. But again, I really encourage as close to the end of the fiscal year to get that audit in. So just to make sure that there's no errors, or, you know, the longer you wait, the more people might not remember some of the little anomalies that happen. But that being said, you know, we do have PTA is going year, you know, in general is a year-round association. I don't know. I hope I answered that right. I mean, I hope that was the answer that I'm interpreting the question properly.
I have two more. How old is stale check? Is there a time limit?
I believe the bank will not do 6 months. We have some banks in my area that won't do 3 months. So once it's past 3 months date, the bank won't, you know, a lot of the banks, you know, you might be able to slip one by, but most of them will not. And if you use the machine, they'll spit it right back out at you. Like if you want to put it into, if you have a debit card, if you're one of the units that has a debit card and you try to put it in, it will spit it right back out. So, so the policy that we recommend for that is what you're going to do. So again, you know, what we've settled on pretty much is if you have an outstanding check and it legitimately went to somebody and for whatever reason they didn't cash it, you reach out to them once and say, we issued you a check on such and such date for this amount. Did you receive it? If not, would you like us to replace it because we do owe you the money? Or you can say, if it's, sometimes it's a volunteer, you didn't cash this check, are you intending to cash it? If not, we will consider it a donation back to the PTA, however you want to word it, but you give the check recipient one shot, one good contact to have them say yes or no, and then you just void the check out or reissue it, depending upon the situation. Don't let them hang around.
The last one I have on this set of questions is an audit. Because of COVID. It sounds like the audit committee could begin this year as of 7/1/20, starting point then from the reconciliation as of 6/30. So, so they're saying, I guess the audit committee can start as of 7/1/20 of last year. Is that a good starting point?
So the starting point should technically be the ending date of your 1920 audit. Hopefully you've done it. And whatever date you ended 20 on is your starting date for 2020, 2021.
But Patty, this particular unit did not get an audit done for last year.
For
Should they start
1920?
with the beginning of this
So then
year?
I recommend starting July 1st. And I do recommend, if you have the opportunity, if you have a gracious committee or even a second committee that would be willing to go back and do your 1920, I would recommend you get it done.
And another unit is asking if their accountant can do the audit as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can, again, it's a legitimate PTA expense as long as it's approved by your membership. You let your membership know we are going to have, you know, so-and-so accountant do our audit. That's fine.
Units are also asking if they're performing an end of year audit, can they still keep their monthly records, or should they retain them, and for how long? Or once the annual audit is done, do they really need to retain the monthly audits?
There is a, in the resource guide, I believe it is in the finance section, a list of the record retention, and tells you how long you should save things. And this is, the record retention list is really based on what the IRS asks of a 501c3. It's not necessarily a PTA thing. So some things are 3 years, some things are 7. So I would recommend looking at the record retention list in the resource guide. Some things are permanent records of the association. They can be electronic permanent, but they need to be permanent. So you know, a unit, if you're going to choose to keep your records electronically or paper, you should have, again, the procedure in place. We either store, if it's paper, we store everything in the filing cabinet in the building. We use this box, and, you know, we make sure that everyone knows this box gets passed on to the next person. If we're doing it electronically, we will say whatever the, you know, right now we would probably use flash drives to pass things on. Who knows what the next technology will be? We could use the cloud, whatever, but we need to protect the records. So just like, you know, sometimes things, you know, one president doesn't pass on to the next president, we lose everything. So we should have a record retention system in place at your unit, however you choose to do it.
Rob and Amani, this is Kyle. You have the next set of questions in your email.
Oh, wow.
It says next set of questions.
Yeah.
Thanks,
there's one,
Kyle. I think we're good because we got through some of them already straight from the chat. The next question has to do with signatures, Patty. Because of COVID, they have not been having 2 signatures on their checks, which we know is required for PTA checks, because they haven't met each other to have duplicate signatures. How can they fix this after the fact? There's no fixing up to
Right. Well, there's really no fixing, but what you can do is, so for instance, we wrote a check, just, you know, like we wrote a check for $100. I wrote the check for $100 to send in for, I don't know, just to say postage and, you know, stamps or whatever we needed $100 for. I wrote the check and I didn't have a second signature, but there should be a disbursement form, right? That said, I request a check for $100, right? Mary requested a check for $100. Patty, treasurer, wrote her the check. What we could have is one of our second signatures can come through to that disbursement request, review it and sign off and say, yes, I did approve this. Or really what Patty, treasurer, should have been doing when she wrote the check was get like an email or a text or something that I could print to say, my second signature did approve me writing this check. So however you can fix that is by where your paper trail is. Get a paper trail somehow. So again, if nothing happened, if you didn't get approval from somebody else as treasurer to write the check with a second, get it now and put it, you know, have them sign off on the disbursement form.
Basically try to document as much as possible,
Yes.
where a second person is verifying the expense and the check was
Right.
legitimate, right? That's what
Right.
you would do after that. So how about electronic signatures? They were asking, for example, PayPal. How do you get 2 electronic approvals on something like that?
Same way. So if you're paying something by way of PayPal, right, have an email come, again, something that you can print from a signature that says, I approve the PayPal payment to Oriental Trading for $59.32. Like have somebody else approve it, and then you print that and attach it to the request to send them. And so then you have something there.
Again, this is very related to what you answered before, but we need clarification. If a unit did not have an audit last year, should the new audit include both years, or should they perform 2 audits? What do you recommend?
I would do 2, and here's what I would say. Let's do the 2020-2021 audit. If it's clean, if it's really good and clean, and it's the same treasurer, do a quick run through of 1920. If it's a different treasurer, I would do a full audit of 1920 as best you can. Again, it's a little late to the game, but at the same time, if there's an issue in 2020, 2021, you might need to know what happened in 1920. So if you can go back and do it, great. You know, the one advantage of 2020, 21 is most people don't have their usual amount of transactions. So the audit should go much quicker. So the audit committee might be gracious enough to want to help with the 1921 as well.
So you recommend going ahead?
I recommend if you can get it done, do it. I mean, it can't hurt, and it might help in the long run if something's not happening the way it should.
Great. And another question about stale checks. How much time before a check is considered stale?
Oh, we did that. That was the 3 or 6 months, depending. It's definitely 6 months, but like I said, some banks are getting particular and
they asked it again. Okay, I think we've covered most grounds. We're getting very good feedback. And there will be more.
Amani, one other question has come in a couple times. I just want to hit that one about Member Hub. So Patty, a couple units have messaged that they use Member Hub for order deposits. And should we attach the payoff reports? And that is above my pay grade, that question.
Yes. Whatever accounting you can get from, like, again, because I know like a lot of people use Member Hub for their spiritware, whatever you can print from them so that we can, again, show where the money is. It's all about showing where the money is, where it went, where it came from, all of that. I would print and do, yes.
Anything else we missed, Kyle? Do you see anything else?
Nope, just that Member Hub came in from a couple different people in a private message. So I wanted to make sure we hit that
Someone
one.
said they cashed their check 5 years later. It really depends on the bank, some of them, and depends on the original check and how it was issued as well. It looks like we covered everything. You got a lot of questions.
Right. So, and I imagine there will be more questions. So, you know, as I was preparing this tonight, and, you know, like I said, I think the slides had a lot of words on it and it's a lot going on. But I will say that, you know, a lot of this is covered right in the resource guide. So you can follow along right in the resource guide. I think we do, you know, we're going to be updating it a little, the resource guide, but I think it's good enough to do an audit and to help you through. But what I would like to do is probably come back to all of you and in around, you know, late May, early June, when audits are starting to kick up. And then rather than have a presentation like this, we'll just have an open conversation and just answer questions. So you can look for that. I think we kind of distinguish that.
We're also being asked if during Summer Leadership Conference, there will be treasurer training.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Typically during the summer, we focus more on the budget. But if there's enough demand for audit, we can cover that as well.
They're asking if a paper copy of the resource guide is available. Can I order one? The answer to that, we all know, no, it's electronic. We might have
it is a no, but it is printable. So certainly, you know, you might not need every section. You know, it's nicely done in sections. So you might not always refer to certain sections in there, but if the finance one is one you refer to a lot, they're, you know, download it, take it to Office Depot or Staples or wherever you go and print it. It would be considered a legitimate PTA expense.
And one really good question just came through the chat. Patty, do you mind?
Sure.
What if we just had one person do an audit instead of a committee?
So it's a similar thing. First off, it's daunting to do it yourself because you have to be checking all of these different places. So, and, you know, the bylaws for a reason, you know, our bylaws for, you know, are historical based on best practices, and the best practice is 3 or more. So I would say try to do it with the 3 if you possibly can. It just, you know, makes it easier for each person to kind of contribute, and it will just make it go quicker.
And if it's somebody with accounting experience, they may be able to pull it off easily without a problem. So one of your parents may be an accountant who's volunteering their services as well.
Right. So if an accountant, a volunteer, a parent volunteer wants to do that, again, have it approved by the membership. Again, bylaws are our guiding factor. Our bylaws say an audit committee of 3 or more or a professional auditor. So let's stay with the bylaws as best we can and get the 3. But the professional can be, it doesn't have to be somebody that we pay. Like you said, if there is an accountant that's a volunteer that wants to offer their services to the PTA, we gladly accept that.
And in wrapping, Patty, do you have any final words of wisdom to us?
No, I just, I hope that in doing this and reviewing the worksheet that we find that it is a manageable task for any unit to take care of their audit. I am open for questions all the time. I'm sure the region directors are as well. So I personally, again, believe that the audit and being able to report that to your membership is really key in the fact that we want to, as part of our fiduciary responsibility as PTA leaders, to say that we are good stewards for the association. So I appreciate and thank everybody who's doing that work on behalf of PTA. And yeah, look for the notice. I think if it's okay with the Leadership Development Committee, that we set up a web chat in about 6 weeks or so that people can just talk audit. We don't have to have, the slides with all the words on it. We can just kind of chat and answer questions that have come up. I'm certainly happy to do that.
Finally, there's a question. Do your monthly audits have to be done by an audit committee or just the annual?
So monthly reconciliations are just for the bank statement, really, and they're just to make sure that what was supposed to go into the bank that month went into the bank, and what came out was important for that month. So again, you knew when the big fundraiser was or the big event that people had to pay money to go to. That money should go in the bank that month, and obviously there are expenses tied to all of that should have gone out. So no.
Responsible for those monthly reconciliations.
Yeah, they should be quick, and it's just like you do your home, reconciliations of your own checking accounts.
The treasurer basically shows them at the meeting, correct? And
right. It's usually if you can have somebody come up 10 to 15 minutes before a meeting starts, or stay 10, like not really after, because you really want to be able to report at the meeting. Mary and Susie, reviewed our bank statement, and they approved, everything was in order, and they signed for it. It's very quick, but.
Or if we were not meeting in person, scan them up, email them to the people who are going to be at the, running the meeting, and
sure.
So here's my bank statement, here's my reconciliation. And
yes.
And it's ready.
Yes. I mean, I didn't go into big detail about the whole COVID thing because I think everybody's managing it their own way. But again, if there's any questions about how you're managing your things and you're feeling constraints because of COVID, again, reach out to your region director. We have great information that the region directors have been sharing with the units about how to deal with COVID. And then also, again, you're welcome to email me anytime. I appreciate it if you include your unit if you're reaching out to me, like what part of the state you're from, so we can keep everybody in the loop. But treasurer@nyspta.org is where to find me.
Thank you so much, Patty, for
Thanks.
this incredible presentation. I always learn more from you on Treasury Matters every time.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Leadership Development team, also thanks to Rob Rijos, our Leadership Development Coordinator, for putting together this great number of webinars this year. Look for training webinars to continue the first Wednesday of every month. We're gonna probably slow down a little bit for July and August and restart in September. And we're looking for topics. Your suggestions for topics on what webinars would be helpful to you in doing your PTA work. So always use the chat at nyspta.org to contact us with suggestions for future webinars. We thank you so much for staying with us this evening. And thank you, Patty, for such
Thank
an
you.
enormous amount of information and sharing your knowledge on treasury.
Thank you. And thank you all for being my first to ever hear my audit workshop. Hopefully it won't be my last one.
It's great.
It was great. Thank you, Patty. It was
All right.
great.
Thank you, everyone.
And thanks, Kyle, for helping us out.
Lots of
Always.
questions. Appreciate it.
Good night.